You can only do the best job you can. To somebody else, it might not seem like you're doing a great job, but if that is your best, you are going in with your whole heart, taking care of somebody, taking care of somebody's body, taking care of somebody's emotions, trying to guide them through the process that they're going through as well. Congratulate yourself.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, a global community of women in midlife. I'm here to tell you that it's your time now to rediscover what has always been inside of you and bring that out into the world. If you're wondering what's next, but don't know quite what that is, or if you feel a twinge in your heart telling you that you have so much more to do and so much more to offer, you're in the right place. Ask yourself, if not now, when? Do you want to leave your job, start your own business, take control of your health, reignite the passion in your marriage, write that book, or at least that first chapter? Transitions like this can be daunting, but through listening to my story and interviews with incredible women every week, I hope to inspire you to take action. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, and we are a global community of women in midlife. Our mission is to be the global platform for women in midlife. We want women like you to realize that there is no limit to your potential, regardless of your age or your circumstances. We're here to help you get unstuck, approach your next stage of life with excitement, and address common and to address issues that are common to all of us, yet not addressed in a comprehensive way. To that end, we have a very special guest today who will be discussing a topic that I'm sure is relevant to many of us. That is the caring of our aging parents and navigating the sandwich generation that many of us find ourselves in. My guest today is Neela White. Neela is a portfolio manager at 3Max, a division of Raymond James Ltd, with more than 2 decades of experience working in the financial industry, providing insight and inclusive wealth management services for a variety of clients. Neela presents an empathetic approach, when assisting clients with their finances and draws on her firsthand experience of caring for elderly parents. She advocates for open discussions about and preparation for life-changing events and their burdens, both financially and emotionally, to better equip and protect families against any long-term care costs. Her relatable style inspires families to examine their financial plan and empowers them to have fresh conversations about viable options. After graduating with degrees in psychology and gerontology, she has continued her education and passion in aging. As an active public speaker on the subject of the costs of caregiving and the sandwich generation, Neela often participates in conferences, interviews, and educational events. So wow, that's such a great background you have, Neela. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Yes, I was reading your bio and your focus on aging and both taking care of aging parents as well as helping the sandwich generation through so many pressures that we all face. And it's something that we often don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into this type of work? Maybe I think I understand you had a personal experience which has really informed your work as well. So perhaps you could tell our listeners all about how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, it's a bit of an interesting route. I think, like many people graduating from high school, you go to university thinking, this is what I want to be for the rest of my life. For me, it was, I want to be a doctor. I wanted to go out and save the world. And unfortunately, I didn't get into med school. And I had to really look at, well, what else do I know how to do and I'm comfortable doing? And for me, it was working with the aging. So after I did my degree in psychology, I went on and did a degree in gerontology, and I worked in long-term care. And it was a real eye-opener. And obviously, through the pandemic, we have heard many, many, many recounts and reports on the gaps in our healthcare system. And I discovered that 25 years ago. And I realized it wasn't at that time a career that I could sustain. And I made a career change into finance. So re-educated myself and went into finance. And along the journey of finance, suddenly my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and we were told that he had 3 months left to live. And at that point, it was, wow, my dad is going to die. What's mom going to do? And I remember rushing home, and the first thing on my mind at the time was, where's the will? Okay, it's at the lawyer's. Where's the power of attorney for care? Where's the power of attorney for property? Mom, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it was me desperately wanting her to acknowledge that she would be a widow so that she can move into enjoying dad's last days. But like many, many people, when they have and they discover such a trauma happening in their life, they're losing their lifelong partner. I think there's a period of stasis, of being catatonic, where you're denying it, you're in denial, you're angry, you're disbelieving. And that was my mom. That was completely my mom. So I had to step in and take on the role of power of attorney for care and manage dad through the dying process so that mom wouldn't be left with probably that as her lasting memory. And suddenly, going back to being a portfolio manager, it occurred to me, oh my gosh, if I have a background in aging, I worked in long-term care before I made the career change. My dad was a doctor, and conversations about dying and death were frequent in our house, so it wasn't a taboo subject. And this was overwhelming. It was stressful. It was confusing navigating the healthcare system. Suddenly it occurred to me, oh my gosh, if I had all of this preparation and I find it overwhelming, imagine for our clients, imagine for the people out there that will go through this or will be touched by this in some way. So I ended up sort of going back to my educational roots and incorporating longevity planning, the cost of aging, navigating the healthcare system into my practice. And the story actually got worse after that. After my dad died, my mom had this void. Now being a widow, who was she? I think it was a bit of an identity crisis. And sort of old school, old generation, where you were defined by your role. Her role was mom, her role was wife, her role was homemaker. And these roles now had to be reestablished, and she had a hard time doing this. Well, fast forward 2.5 years after my dad died, my mom had an extremely fluke accident. And this is a lady that was a 5-time cancer survivor. She fell headfirst and five times. Thank goodness for early discovery was addressed. But yeah, she quite a fighter.
No
she
kidding.
Got through,
wow.
Yeah, she got through it successfully. And then one day we were having a dinner party. She was living with us at the time. There was a fluke accident. She tripped and fell headfirst into the wall, broke the drywall, no cuts, no bruising, no anything on her head. And she broke her neck.
Oh my God.
And she survived, disabled. So they operated to try to save her legs so that she wouldn't be completely paralyzed. 6 months later, she returned home and she was disabled. And that was a very eye-opening experience as a daughter who is now going to be a caregiver, who is now also a wife, a mother, and working. And it was like nothing I had experienced. We ended up having to hire private care because, again, the gaps in the healthcare system, just because the need is there doesn't mean the availability is there. So to function as a family, we hired care, which was definitely not inexpensive. This allowed us to function and for my mom to maintain some independence by not being in a facility, by being at home with us. And this continued for 5 years. And towards the end of her life, she started symptomatically to become confused, disoriented, a bit paranoid, a bit suspicious. And when we took her again to the doctors, they had diagnosed her with rapid onset dementia, and they had given her 3 months to live. In those 3 months, it was a very shocking time because you end up thinking, here's your mom who's going to die, and look at the life. Look at what she had as her last 5 years, and you feel ripped off. And it just became a really big passion for me to make sure that I spread the word, spread the story, spread the idea of preparedness, because it does take preparation to die well. And she did die. This coming August, 2 years, she would have died. It was a difficult experience, but it's one many of us do as daughters, as sisters, as wives, as mothers.
I can't imagine. And I thank you for sharing that very personal experience. And my goodness, I don't know if how I would have handled it. And even retelling it, I can see that you're emotional, of course. I mean, you've lost your parents in such a kind of a horrible way. And I'm so sorry to hear about that. But I applaud you for taking the learnings of your own experience and actually trying to help other people. And that's incredible. It's congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Yes. When something you said about your mom and the roles she plays, that's interesting you say that, because we talk about that a lot here in this podcast. And it's really about, for women, it's really the roles we play. And sometimes we lose ourselves, right? So it's interesting that you said that in her generation. But boy, it's what an incredible story. And I wanted to ask you a couple of things. You said that it was overwhelming for you because you were working, you had your children, you were looking after your parents. And so that's kind of part of this midlife generation that we find ourselves in. So, and what would you say for people who are facing similar things as you were? What are some of the most important things that we really need to do in terms of taking care of our elderly parents?
I think a couple fundamental things that we all need to do, we should do before the need arises, because oftentimes when the need arises to take care of your parents, it can be quite sudden, starting with going for a routine checkup and coming out with an unexpected diagnosis, that sort of thing. I think to start, and I cannot emphasize more, and I will acknowledge it's not easy, it's not difficult, it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Have those difficult conversations. Start opening up the platform of talking to parents and loved ones, asking the questions, what do you want? What do you expect of me? And that opens up the conversation of you being able to say, I'm not sure I can do this. I don't think I have the capacity to do this. And that way there's time to put support and arrangements in place. So I think having the conversations with parents and parents, you're aging, if you do have the expectation that your children, that your adult children are going to be part of the plan, I think it is, to use maybe it may sound harsh, but I think it's selfish not to have that conversation with your kids. I mean, adult children now are going through possibly different stressors than our parents' generation. I mean, we're coming through COVID and the financial impact of COVID. How did that affect your adult child? Well, if the need of care is imminent, can they afford to take time off work and lose the income to take care of you? Can they dedicate their evening time to taking care of you if they have children and the kids, when things open up, there's hockey, there's soccer, there's dance, all sorts. Can they do that? Do you want them to do that? So I think the first thing that we should all do is just have these open conversations. And I think from there, start developing a bit of a plan, the idea of what do your finances look like? If we can't get enough government-funded care and we've exhausted community resources, mom, dad, what do your finances look like? Can we afford to fill the gaps with private care? What are your feelings towards long-term care? What are your feelings about aging in place? Is this where you want to age? So I think it's having just gentle, progressive conversations. It doesn't have to be all at once, but it's this idea of these suddenly become taboo subjects to have just everyday conversations about, because it does touch on the ideas of control. When you lose some control, when you lose some independence, what do you want? And as humans, none of us want to lose control. None of us want to lose that independence. But I think we need to acknowledge at some point we will need help. And where's that help going to come from?
Right.
Let's try to make it easier for our adult children to help us by helping them. They can only be good support if they know what you want. The one thing I'd say with my mom and dad, they were very open about dying and death, where they want to happen, what they want to happen, having their documents in place. So I didn't have to go through that aspect of taking care of them as opposed to the physical care.
Mm-hmm.
And it made it easier. They told us what they want when they die. What do you want? Do you want a funeral? Do you want a memorial service? All of those little things. And I think it should be a normalized conversation. And certainly the pandemic, I think, has opened up the opportunity to have conversations. We've seen seniors in long-term care die. We've all heard of someone who has passed away. Globally, we can look at the numbers. So people were and are feeling nervous. They're looking more ahead, maybe looking more at aging. So I think now is a perfect time to say, hey, look, this was unexpected. Look what happened. We've come through it on the other side. Can we have this conversation? Or even put in reference of yourself, like, I was worried that something would happen to me during the pandemic. These were my fears. Let's say I was hospitalized. What would happen with my daughter, my husband, stuff like that. And I think if your parents don't want to talk to you about it, you can put in reference to yourself and let you address your fears, and that will open it up also for your parents. Parents want to help their kids, right?
Yes.
Bottom line.
Yes. Such great points. I think that having those open conversations and like you, I know a few years ago, me and my sisters had the same conversation with my parents, and it was hard, but it actually felt better after you have these conversations because you know what they want. And it's all out in the open. And sometimes this popped into my head, whether having those taboo conversations is a cultural thing. They find it more as a cultural thing, or I don't know. I mean, I'm Indian, you're Indian, like there's that taboo about even talking about death. So that came into my head. But I agree, like having the open conversations with the kids, but also having conversations with our kids, like our children, is that your grandparents are going to die one day, and this is how are you going to feel about that? And so such important points. And one of the things you mentioned about with COVID and how people are now talking more about having those conversations, and that really is so true. And in terms of COVID in the last 18 months, you mentioned about having the elderly care more in the forefront with long-term care. What can we learn? Like, what is society missing in terms of? I know that's a big question.
That's a loaded.
That's a huge question. Yeah, but I mean, I know we've learned a lot, but of anything that we've learned in the last 18 months, what do you think?
I think from a healthcare perspective, I think it has certainly shone the light on the fact that long-term care facilities, which are different than retirement homes, that there is a lot of gaps. There's a lot of shortage of staff. The ratio isn't good. So those points have certainly been highlighted. I mean, it's not to say that's all long-term care. There are some great facilities, but I think it's taking that information as an individual and saying, okay, if I thought I wanted to live as I get older and I start needing more and more help and I qualify, and remember, I qualify for long-term care. It's not an automatic. That I'm aware of what the limitations are of being in long-term care, and I'm okay with that. I think if we decide this is not the option that we want and we want to age in place, I think it's also starting to take a look at a lot of the conversation that came up is cost. Where would the funding to increase supports within long-term care come from? Where's the money going to come from to renovate long-term care to make it big open spaces so there's not as many room sharing and stuff like that? So we know there's a cost involved. What is the cost then to stay at home? What sorts of things can you put in place now that will allow you to age safely in place without having to react when the need arises? And it's really quite, simple things that you can start off with. Grab bars in the shower, grab bars by the toilet, no throw rugs. So little things that we can all do. Because it's not to say slipping is necessarily just an aging problem. Like, I mean, I know we have a tiled floor in the kitchen. If it's wet, especially if the dog's drooled when she sees her treat, I have slipped in my bare feet on our own tile floor. So, I mean, it can happen to anyone. So I think it's really looking at, don't close your eyes to what we've just seen happen and start looking. I mean, there's an abundance of resources just on the internet, conversations that you can have with people to start tweaking stuff and putting plans in place. So I think really it's the idea of planning. I think when you have a plan in place, it is a walking guide to say, if A, then B.
Right.
And that is so helpful for everyone.
Great points. Seems normal, but we don't think about these things, right? Until it happens, right?
That's the thing. And maybe that's part of the human condition. But I think we're in an age now and a generation now where these conversations are so fitting because we have the right and the ability to direct so much of our life. Why put your foot on the brake when it comes to this aspect? All through our lives, when we're having young families, developing our career, in our retirement, the honeymoon phase of retirement, it's gleeful. We plan for all of that.
Yes.
And then boom, the planning suddenly stops. And it's like,
I don't have a well. Oh yeah, I should probably get a well.
I do understand. Like it's not the sexy conversation. I mean, the first time I go out with friends and I'm on a patio, it's not going to be, hey, I want to make sure that I get bathed every day. I'm going to make sure I have X amount of extra dollars to make sure I can bring someone in. So it's not that sort of thing, but as opposed to, hey, you know what? Hygiene's really important to me. Here would be an example. I had my second COVID shot and the arm was pretty sore and I actually needed help taking off my shirt to get ready to go and shower. And my husband had to help me because I actually couldn't lift up the arm. And it
was that bad. Wow.
It was, yeah. Thank goodness it's all good now, fully vaccinated, all good. It occurred to me, hey, if I had a stroke and I had no one around to help me, what would I do? So it's little things that.
Yeah. And those have come more in the forefront, I think, in the last 18 months, which I guess is a good thing, because even with my community, I'm finding that as people are at home more and they're thinking about their work and how it has changed, I think people are looking inwards more and they're questioning, do I really want to go back to what I was doing before? Or how does my values change perhaps? And maybe, is this something I still want to continue to do? So it's a lot of inner reflection. And I think a lot of societal issues such as elderly care is really coming into forefront. So, and you're kind of poised to help with that. So that's wonderful. I was also thinking about your story about being a daughter and taking care of your parents. And do you think that there are cultural expectations for women, for daughters to be caregivers or women in general? I mean, is it kind of put on the females more than, from your experience and from your clients? How do you find that?
I would say yes and yes to both. I think regardless of your ethnicity and your cultural origin, I think women as a whole are disproportionately affected by caregiving, and whether it's raising a young family or on the other end of the barbell, taking care of aging parents or in-laws, stuff like that. So I think that still disproportionately falls to women. And we certainly saw that during the pandemic as well, with schools being closed, daycares being closed. Women were more affected with unemployment than their male counterparts. So yes, we do see that just as being a female. I think culturally, there is also a bit of a bias. I mean, as you pointed out, my parents were Indian, and it was the idea that part of the reason why you're glad to have daughters is because your daughters will take care of you at the end. Daughters are taught to cook. A good daughter is taught to cook and to clean and all of that before you get married, so that you can take care of your husband. Just in case your husband's hands don't work or something like that. But yeah, and it's funny because I look at this back now when I'm thinking about this. Mom and dad were very pro get yourself educated, get a good job, be financially independent of anyone. So if anything happens, you're not reliant on someone for your well-being. They were very pro-like that. And yet there were other things that were so culturally inbred, and it's, learn to cook and clean and take care of the house. And one day when We need care. You're going to be the one bathing me and changing my brief and Medipad. And I'm thinking, I don't ever remember those conversations ever being had with my brother.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Never. And as it turned out, as we were growing up, they used to joke saying how I would be the one to take care of mom and dad because of my background in aging and because I was the baby of the family. Part of me at the time used to sort of laugh, but I think it was almost a nervous laugh, thinking we're getting older and older and closer to this, and suddenly it became a reality. And I look back on it now and I think, yeah, we were, for lack of a better word, almost groomed to do
Yes.
this.
Yes. Well, we were talking about the roles that women play, right? And that it just seems as though that is one of the roles that we kind of are expected.
It's such an emotional role. Like, I mean, when my father was dying and my mom was his caregiver, sort of an older generation where she was defined by her role. So her role was wife, mother, homemaker, and then later on in life, obviously caregiver to my father. And it was such a stressful, emotional role that I know when my father died, my mom had a really hard time readjusting herself to who am I? What am I? Where do I fit in to this whole dynamic now that I'm not a wife, I'm not a caregiver, my children are grown up and they can manage on their own. And she was very, very lost. And I don't know that she ever recovered from that. Her fondest wish towards the end was, I can't wait to see your father. And like when I think about that, it makes me feel sad because I think you had so much more to give and to do. You're a grandmother. You have grandchildren. So roles change, roles shift. Let's try to adapt. But it was very difficult for her to adapt for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's what we talk about a lot here because we end up, whether it's midlife or if it's older than that, we end up really looking after everybody else and we look after ourselves probably last. And it's time really to think about looking after ourselves and how do we do that and how do we take care of ourselves, especially when there's so many pressures as women, especially because as you talk about the roles we play. And so I'm sure that you went through a lot of these pressures and we talked about earlier. What advice, I mean, how did you take care of yourself and how would you advise women to take the pressure off? Because part of Power Purpose Play is play. And by play, that means self-care. It means looking after yourself and dealing with these different pressures. So maybe you have some advice or some pointers for.
I think a big thing is being a caregiver, the care recipients tend to be very isolated. And somehow as a result of being a caregiver, you tend to become socially isolated as well. You feel the need. I can't go out with friends for a drink or for lunch because something might happen. And the more you do that, the more you isolate yourself. And the more isolated you become, the more you become one with your thoughts, your worries, your fears, your stress. I think it is super important to maintain your social contacts, even if it's by text messaging, phone, FaceTime, especially we're in the age of technology where this has really showed us how valuable technology is. I think it's super important to maintain your social contacts. And I know as a caregiver, it is very easy to say, I don't have time. When do you find the time to do all this? And I do get that. So it's even little things like when you go to have your shower, take a moment to get out of your head and just listen to what's around you. So listen to the water, have music playing while you're showering, just let go when you're in there. And for some people, it might be letting go in the shower and crying. You're surrounded by water, warm water, you're being soothed. Let your senses take over, I think. And right there, that's 5 minutes of just some peace. I think something we all forget to do, whether we're taking care of our kids or our parents or anything, pat yourself on the back. None of these roles are easy. They may not come naturally. They all come with stresses. Congratulate yourself. Pat yourself on the back. You are doing something I've learned, and I heard this when I was in the hospital. You can only do the best job you can. To somebody else, it might not seem like you're doing a great job, but if that is your best, you are going in with your whole heart taking care of somebody, taking care of somebody's body, taking care of somebody's emotions, trying to guide them through the process that they're going through as well. Congratulate yourself. So I think that's super, super important. Ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things we never want to ask for help. And part of it may be, I'm afraid somebody's going to say no, or maybe I like the feeling of being a martyr and having this all on my shoulders by myself. Maybe it's proving something to myself or fulfilling something. I think it's really important to ask for help. It does. There was an expression that came out a long time ago, and I honestly did not fully understand it until I had to take care of my mom. And it was, it takes a village. It
Yep.
really does. It really does. There is a lot going on with ourselves, with those around us, and we can't do it all. And I think it's acknowledging we can't do it all. We want to. It's not a weakness that you can't.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't built to take on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's being able to say, I need help. Can you help me?
Yes.
If your parent is a wanderer, or if it's end of life and there's vigil, can you take a half an hour from your day? Just stay here. I'm available by phone. I'm going to go for a walk.
Mm.
People are more willing to say yes than most people believe, especially when they know what you're going through, because we're all going to be touched by this.
Yes. Such great points, Neela. And everything that you just mentioned, it can be done even if we're not going through these things. You mentioned being in the moment, letting your senses take over. So important, even we saw this during COVID, right? And if you can really let things get to you, but if you try and enjoy even those little moments, like you said, in the shower or going for a walk, being in nature, and then congratulating yourself. And women don't do that enough. People don't do that enough, especially women don't do that enough. You know, we've done a lot. We are doing a lot. We're trying our best. So, like you said, pat yourself on the back. So important. And then asking for help. Again, finding your people, right? Finding your tribe.
Yes.
Because you can't do it. You can't do it alone. I mean, and there's no shame in that.
Hi, my friend. Kavita here. Do you often feel blocked from moving forward? We all feel that way at times. These are referred to as energy blocks. I've created a short, actionable PDF guide to help you release your negative energy blocks. Click the link in the description to download it now for free. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I think that's key. We're in a time in our lives where, as a middle-aged person, you've developed all sorts of circles, the circle that's close to you and an extended circle. So there are people that can help for various jobs. Maybe you're thinking, this friend isn't able to sit with my mom or dad while they're sleeping or while they're watching TV. Take a look around. Which other friend is able to do this for you? So I think we have those that are close to us. We have those that are maybe not as close to us, but we can still say, hey, I need some help. Can you help me? And remember to say thank you.
Yes.
It's such an emotional task, and it means a lot when you can have some moments to yourself and thank you and be grateful for that. And I think it's hard to do this, and I'll be the first to say that it is hard to do this when you're so stressed out and so overwhelmed. Being able to take 1 minute and just take a piece of paper or a book and say, what is one thing today that I'm grateful for?
Yeah.
It could be, hey, I'm absolutely resentful that I have to do this. Absolutely. Those are among feelings that come up. But am I grateful that I have a friend that I can text and say, I am just feeling horrible today? And they send you some sort of emoji that makes you laugh, or some sort of little video that makes you laugh. That is something that you can be grateful for, a moment of a smile.
Yes.
So little things, as mundane and stuff as it may seem, it is important.
It's so important. There's an exercise that I talk about. It's called the top 3 things. And that's it. The top 3 things that you're grateful for. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be that look at the flowers outside, they're blooming. Or I just was able to enjoy a beautiful breakfast, or just little things. And those are so important because it grounds you, and really helps you get through those tough times as well.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of getting through tough times, it seems that you have a lot of courage.
Thank you.
And going through what you did, it takes a lot of courage. And we talk about courage a lot here. How is it that you can face so many obstacles and get through them? And how do we get through these obstacles? Because there's fears, there's beliefs that we put on ourselves that we can't do things, or how do we take the next step? So do you have any, based on your experience, how did you find the courage?
Wow. Thank you for that compliment. I don't think I've ever seen myself as courageous. So thank you for that. I think one of the things that when I took on this role, or when this role came to me, I think what I looked at was what I needed to be able to show my daughter. My daughter, I only have the one child. She is a daughter. And in my mind, I know I want to impart, today was my last day. The things I want to impart to her is strength and courage and resilience and fearlessness. And for me, part of that was taking on caring for her grandma who's going to die.
Yes.
Showing her the vulnerability and the sheer vulnerability of being a daughter caring for your mom. And I will give a shout out to my husband. He was great. He was very, very supportive, very helpful. I mean, when my mom had her accident, he would go on his lunch break and he would go make sure she ate, hold a bowl under her mouth to help her brush her teeth. And that was one of the tasks. And it's funny because he has a very weak stomach, so he gags quite a bit, changing diapers, cleaning up vomit, stuff like that. And he would go and help Ma brush her teeth.
Oh, that takes courage. That's courageous.
I look back on being in COVID, and you do some of this sometimes because you're in space together and stuff like that. And in moments when I feel irritable, I would look back and say, hey, look what you did to help me.
That's beautiful.
So that was part of my support system. I think it was just looking at the end goal. And I don't mean end goal as in death, and death might be the end goal that you focus on. But it was just trying to remember that this time will pass. Granted at the time, the 5 years felt like it was going to last forever. It was draining. But realizing one day this is going to end. How do I want to look back and remember myself, not the experience, because memory does sort of tend to have all those emotions fade. Even though sometimes my voice breaks when I talk about this, the whole inner turmoil does fade. But it's how do I want to look back on this and see me as the daughter I hope I could be, as the person I want my daughter to know I am. So I was trying to put myself out, hey, if I could look at myself if I was writing a letter to myself in 2025 to talk to myself about this experience that I went through, what would I hope I would be able to say of how I was, good and bad, the good and bad stuff? Who did I become as a result of that? And what did I impart to my daughter as she'll be going to university in a year. Who is she? Has she taken any of this experience that she saw me go through? And she helped a bit with both Ma and Dad. Can she take those parts and make that part of her life in who she is and how she treats people and how she cares for people? So for me, it was a bigger experience than the fact that one day, Dad died, one day Ma's going to die, and she is dead now. But these things are lasting.
Oh my God, you're going to make me cry. That's so beautiful. Honestly, that there's nothing more than, just what you just said, that's courageous in itself to reflect on how you've grown as a person and how you reacted to the situation. And then also, how is this going to impact your daughter? And what kind of role model am I for my daughter in dealing with these difficult situations? So fabulous. Sorry, you were going to say?
The one thing I would like to say, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying this job was easy. It was the hardest. So I'll be 52 in December. I can honestly say in my 52 years, it was the hardest, most taxing job that I have ever done. There were some very bad moments, very low points where the burden was just so much and so much resentment. And this could be a whole nother conversation on the family dynamics when you have
Mm-hmm.
siblings and who actually does most of the stuff and all that. I remember sitting in the car, blasting music and just screaming at the top of my lungs just to vent. I needed to vent. It wasn't the sort of venting I could do, but it wasn't the sort of venting I wanted my husband or my daughter to see, like, to that end. And I would go drive to the park, sitting in the parking lot, and I would just scream at the top of my lungs until the feeling came out and the calm came back, and then go back and do what I needed to do. But you do need to vent.
That's good you did
Otherwise
that.
you're going to blow up.
Yeah. No, and it's great you mentioned that, because it's reality, and nobody's perfect, and you try your best, like you said, and congratulate yourself with what you've been able to do, and don't be so hard on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because it is a difficult thing. So, wow, this is just amazing. Like, just had an amazing experience. Now, I just wanted to ask you, like, now that you talked about your work a little bit before. So your focus on your work is in elderly care and fun. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and anything new and what kind of, how you're taking your learnings and putting them into what you're doing right now at work?
Okay, so I guess work-wise, what I do is I'm a portfolio manager, a financial advisor. So I manage clients' assets, their funds. What I've incorporated as part of the practice is the whole component of longevity planning, of what do you want as your supports? Are you prepared for a health crisis? Do you have a health crisis plan?
Mm-hmm.
If you do need care, do you have the resources to say, okay, at $30 an hour, can you contract in care until you can move to plan B, whichever plan B may be? Do you have wills, powers of attorney in place? So it's incorporating the aging component into the plan, because I think what we often forget when we talk about retirement planning, the thought is immediately, when I retire, it's going to be an awesome trip, really nice car, maybe renovate the kitchen, all of those things. But at some point, when all of the honeymoon stage of retirement is over, I think we do have to think about longevity, because there's so many things we don't know. Will we have a health crisis? If so, how long, how severe?
Right.
And I think, because the one thing we don't know yet is the date we're going to die, that it becomes, you need to plan with that. And what I've also tried to do, and interestingly enough, out of college, I'm taking a program in thanatology right now, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. And just this weekend, I did death doula training. So death doula training is helping people and their families go through the dying process to understand what's actually happening to the body, the legacy component, the vigil, the actual grief and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why I'm doing that is, I think, to be able to have fulsome conversations with my clients, I need to be able to get over the obstacles that they might have about doing certain things. So one of the statistics floating around out there is 50% of all Canadians do not have a will.
What?
Yeah. So imagine dying without a will. Who do you want stepping into that role? Just a anonymous person? No, and I know we don't want that. So it becomes, what are your fears with making a will, making a power of attorney? Are you superstitious? Is this a cultural sort of superstition that you think the day you make a will is the day you're going to die?
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to get a better understanding, have more fulsome conversations about why we put off things that we know are inherently important, but we don't do. I use the example, if we stand in line to buy a lottery ticket, there's the time of standing in line, and the probability of winning is, I think it's like 1 in 33 million.
Yes.
What is the probability that one day we are going to die? That's 100%. So
right.
let's take a look at what's promoting and prompting our behavior.
Yes.
And actually, next week I'm taking a patient navigator program at York University, and part of it is what I'm seeing happen more and more as clients are aging, whether it's our older client or their adult children are coming to us and saying, "Mom or Dad just got diagnosis with dementia. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Can you help me?" And I think for me, it's being able to say, I have this background in aging. I have the experience of having been a caregiver. And now I can actually say, I understand how to navigate the healthcare system better than I did 10 years ago when it was through trial and error, sort of learn by fire then,
Right.
that at least I can say, hey, as part of our practice, my commitment is to aging and all things aging. I cannot just advise you on how to manage the money and what to put in place, but it's also how to help you through this really stressful, very confusing time in your life. And
And
I think,
emotional too, right?
yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's meaningful. I mean, if somebody could have said, "Hey, here's your flow chart, Neela. Here's what you're supposed to do," that would have been great.
I love the way that you've incorporated all your background and all your experience, and you're still learning and you're still
Mhm.
and I think that's so invaluable because like you said, I mean, I don't know what I would do. And so I think whatever services you're offering, it's not only from the financial aspect, but it's from your own personal experience as well as
Mhm.
your experience with caring for seniors and all this education that you've got. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I can't imagine a better person to go to for that type of for
Thank
that
you.
type
I
of help.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else that you'd like to share about that or?
I would just for anyone listening to the podcast and thinking about stuff, I would say start today. It doesn't have to be big and tsunami like having this blah conversation. It doesn't have to be intimidating or fear provoking. It could just be, hey, if I couldn't speak for myself, this is who I'd like to speak for me, and this is what I would like. Start with one point and start today. Don't put it off.
Mm,
We all, I'm sure, have heard stories where tragic accidents happen without any notice at all.
yes.
There are two very different components. There is dying, where you need to have somebody actively being an advocate for you. And there's the other component of actually being dead and having people around you grieve and have to support each other and fill the role. So you can see that there's lots of components. I think it's never too early to start. So, someone asked me, well, my daughter will be 17 in September. Like, have you had these conversations with her? And actually, one of the exercises I had to do for the thanatology program was to describe my own dying process and death and what I want, who I want around me, what I want around me. And I shared that with my daughter so that she knows. And it wasn't easy. I mean, you're looking into a little kid's eyes,
Oh
and
God.
you're seeing this little baby that you've nurtured, even though she's taller than me and stuff. And so it's not easy, but it's so important. And the funny thing is, she was able to say the word, "Well, Mom, if you're dead, what should I do with Dad?"
Oh my God.
So at least I didn't say take care of your father. I didn't put that on her.
Yes.
But it was like, just make sure he's okay every once in a while. But
That's
she actually said it, and I thought, hey, look, like I told her that I will die one day, and
yes.
and she will take that and slowly process it in her own way,
Mm-hmm.
and she'll go and get on with
Yes.
the next thing she was looking
Great
at it
advice.
on TikTok, right? Like, but it's there, it's
So
out there.
start now. Start now.
Start now.
Start. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Neela, how can we find you? And if anyone is interested in your services and what you're doing, let us know how we can find you. We'll have everything in the show notes, but just so you can let everybody know.
Okay. Wow. If you want to reach out and even just further discussion, or if you're having a tough time and you want an ear, you can reach me. My work phone number is 416-597-7946. You can email me. That's nwhite@3max. That's the number 3macs.com. Or you can just Google me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. So you can just put in Neela White, and hopefully I pop up.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and so many great points. And these conversations are difficult, but they're really, I believe, very important to have. And for our listeners, if we're not in the sandwich generation, we will be, or we were. And like looking after our elderly parents and dealing with death and facing it is something that we're all going to have to face And so the points that you made and the story you shared about your own experience is incredible, and really appreciate all the great advice you've given us today.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity today, Kavita. This has been a real pleasure to be featured on your show, which is just, I think it's so powerful that we in our middle lives are being recognized and validated. And I think that's awesome that you're doing this. So thank you. It's a pleasure and a proud moment for me to be on your show today.
I was so touched by Neela White's own personal and tragic story of her caring for her elderly and dying parents, and the passion by which she has drawn from her experience to provide insights to the work she does for her clients. Neela's tips to have those open discussions about death and the preparation for it, both financially and emotionally, are so important. Here are her key takeaways. Number 1, have those difficult conversations with your parents and loved ones. Ask the questions, what do you want? What do you expect of me? What do your finances look like? What are your feelings towards long-term care or aging in place? Number 2, as humans, none of us want to lose control. We need to acknowledge that at some point we will need help and understand where is that help going to come from. 3, women as a whole are disproportionately affected by caregiving, whether raising a young family or taking care of aging parents or in-laws. Roles shift and adapt, especially as women. 4, being a caregiver tends to make you feel isolated. It's very important to maintain your social contacts. 5, take a moment to get out of your head and listen to what's around you. Let yourself go in the shower and cry. Let your senses take over for peace. 6, pat yourself on the back. None of these roles are easy. They don't come naturally. Congratulate yourself. 7, ask others for help. It takes a village. We can't do it all ourselves. It's not a weakness. We weren't built to take on everything. 8, remember to say thank you and also to be able to take 1 minute and say, what is one thing today that I'm grateful for? 9, why do we put things off that we know are inherently important? Start today. Start with 1 point and start today. Don't put it off. It's not easy, but it's so important. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and review. It really does mean a whole lot, and it allows this podcast to reach more and more people. I'm so passionate about bringing forward these important topics as we experience them in midlife. We can all learn from one another, and if you have any specific requests or ideas to make us even better, please share. Drop me a line at kavita@powerpurposeplay.ca. If you're interested in our signature program, It's My Time Now, How to Rediscover Yourself in Midlife, contact me to be placed on the waiting list for the fall. We have just completed our first session and has been a life-changing experience for so many. I take you through a curated journey of reinvention with tools, templates, live calls, and accountability groups. Let me know if you're interested. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe and stay well.